Back with you here on Thursday evening, last show of the week. And I did a little video from my couch, maybe last weekend, I want to say. And it's funny, I did one on LeBron when he went over 40,000 points. And that one did really well. And it's just encouraging to me that I can take my phone, flip it, throw a green screen behind me, and just give my thoughts for 30 seconds. And those things can really blow up and get a lot of traction. Well, last weekend, or whenever it was that Jake Paul and Mike Tyson was announced, I did another one. I did another one on that very fight. And it still is getting traction on YouTube, on Facebook in particular. Facebook seems to really be into that subject and that topic. And I'm surprised the kind of reaction I got to it. Not just that it got views, but the blowback that I'm getting for the point of view. Let me play you the original take, if you will. Again, these are just like, I should just start branding those couch thoughts. They're the ones I'm at the end of the night, I'm laying there with on my couch and shooting myself on the phone screen there and just putting it out into the universe. And here's the little video that I did and what people are reacting to. Mike Tyson should not be fighting anybody, and that includes Jake Paul. He's in much more danger in this fight. You have to remember, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out came out almost 40 years ago. His showdown with Stone Cold Steve Austin was more than 25 years ago. And hell, The Hangover came out more than 15 years ago. So anybody thinks he's just going to win is counting their chickens when Mike should really be playing with his pigeons. And Mike Tyson, people are calling me a hater and all sorts of stuff and telling me I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm concerned for Mike Tyson in this fight. I am. The man is 57 years old. And what's the line from Chappelle's show with Rick James? He says, cocaine's a hell of a drug. Well, what I've found in recent years is that nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug because people are... They get hypnotized by stuff that they saw in the past. And I'm surprised how many different people I see say that Mike Tyson is just going to whip Jake Paul or destroy Jake Paul, or it's not going to be a close fight, or, Jake Paul's an idiot for taking this fight. I mean, I disagree. Well, Jake Paul might be an idiot for taking the fight, but for different reasons. And I know that the training footage came out today. In case you haven't seen it, here is the Mike Tyson training footage. I believe it's literally from today or yesterday in preparation for the fight. And I'm not saying the guy doesn't look good. I'm not saying, he doesn't have power or anything. So that's just, he said it's day one, the fun just begun. That's just, a regular sparring video. It's also, I could counter that and show footage of Mike Tyson with a cane and walking with a using a cane and needing a wheelchair a couple of years ago. Now, that's not because of age. I understand he had a back issue. I believe he had sciatica, and I had sciatica. I understand how painful that can be. I do.
Can you guys vouch for me? Am I right?
Yep. How you doing, Mike? Good to see you, brother. You looking good, Mike.
You're welcome. Mr. Tyson.
And I'm not saying Mike Tyson ain't taking care of himself either. Don't get it twisted. I'm not dissing Mike Tyson. I'm not shitting on Mike Tyson. But when I say nostalgia is a hell of a drug, here's what I mean. With Tyson, people have been hypnotized by bro for a long time. Beyond probably his actual accomplishments. I mean, he was the baddest man on the planet for a minute. He was one of the toughest sons of, you'll ever see. I mean, youngest heavyweight champion ever. I grew up playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I love that game. It's a great game. So I understand where that comes from. When you play that, that's entrenched in your brain. You're Little Mac and you're going through Bald Bull and, all the other characters that you go through in that game, Glass Joe and the tiger dude with the blinking the gem in his forehead, and so many. There's so many different, people he had to beat in that game. Soda Popinski. It's a great game. I mean, you could argue it was the greatest game ever. And Mike Tyson used to savagely knock dudes out. He did. But that was a long, long time ago. And beyond that, Mike Tyson lost a lot later in his career. And I remember back then seeing those fights happen, seeing those losses happen, and yet people still believing Tyson was going to knock out the next person he fought. Believing Tyson was still going to destroy his next opponent. And it shows you how much they were hypnotized by the kind of character he was, the kind of, spectacle he was when he was at his best. But do people remember Mike Tyson's later fights? People don't, I don't think. I think they forget. And I'm not even talking about Evander Holyfield or Lennox Lewis, who I believe beat him twice. I'm talking about the likes of Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. You probably don't remember those. Danny Williams and Mike Tyson fought in, let's see when that fight was, 2004. Mike Tyson was a 9-1 favorite in that fight. A 9-1 favorite. And he was knocked out. 251 of the fourth round. Knocked out by someone called Danny Williams. And that goes beyond the Buster Douglas fight. That's 2004. In 2005, Mike Tyson fought Kevin McBride. I'm sorry. Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. Who the hell remembers these people? They probably don't even remember they beat Mike Tyson at this point. Kevin McBride. Tyson appeared to be ahead on points on the judges' scorecards through 6 rounds. He failed to answer the bell for the 7th round and was ruled defeated by technical knockout. So Mike Tyson lost to Danny Williams and Kevin McBride in 2004 and 2005. That was a long time ago, bro, that he lost to those guys. He lost to those guys. Not Lennox Lewis, not Evander Holyfield, Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. 20 years ago, he lost to them. And in the video, I laid out so much of what's gone on since then. I mean, you go back and you look at it. Mike Tyson's punch out was 40 years ago. 40. My entire lifespan. Right? The showdown with Stone Cold Steve Austin, which was the coolest thing I could ever remember seeing, was in 1999. That's 25 plus years ago. 25 plus years. Essentially Jake Paul's age. It's been Jake Paul's entire lifetime since the Stone Cold Mike Tyson bit. And then I use The Hangover as a reference. Because why did I use The Hangover as a reference? Because you see Mike Tyson in The Hangover as a throwback to an old school figure. Not as someone currently popular. Not as someone who's currently a big deal. But a throwback to a popular figure. The Hangover came out 15 years ago. 15. So I get why there's interest in the fight. I'm not saying I know the thumbnail for this says stop the fight. I'm just trying to catch people's attention. And no, I don't believe Mike Tyson should be fighting anyone. I really don't. Anyone at this point in time, this phase of his life. The risks far outweigh the rewards. With that said, they're grown men. They can decide what they want to do. They can sign up for what they want to sign up for. Netflix can broadcast it if they want to broadcast it. And people will watch. I will watch. I ain't going to lie. I ain't going to front. It's curiosity clicks, essentially. I'll watch the fight. I'm not saying, I'm not going to go crazy and lose my mind. But I will say I'm concerned for Mike Tyson. I am. because Jake Paul's not a scrub. That's the other thing about it. I keep hearing people say, he's fighting a YouTuber. In a sense, look, I'm not delusional. Jake Paul is not a world-class boxer. He finally fought a professional boxer and didn't win that fight. But he has shown enough in the ring to show he's not a scrub. And he also has legit power. So I don't know how much, cumulative damage Mike Tyson suffered in his career. I always say that the term punch drunk is really another word for CTE before we knew what CTE was and is. But at the same time, I'm not saying that, by the way, I love the Polar stuff. I want Polar to sponsor. I'm not a huge fan of coconut flavored things just because they remind me of alcohol. I don't drink. If you want the whole explanation for why, go down the playlist on the podcast channel here on YouTube. I did a whole, search for the YouTube channel. I did a whole episode about that. And I guess because there's so many coconut flavored vodkas or whatever. So whenever I taste something coconut flavored, it makes me think of alcohol, which I don't want to think of when I'm drinking a seltzer. It says right there on the can, seltzer. But I'm not saying they should call the fight off for real. It's going to make a lot of money. It's a spectacle. It's a circus. It's a commentary on the state of boxing. And I don't want to go over the top either. I hope nothing bad happens. Nothing bad will probably happen. But it's not a risk that should be taken. And I do think Mike Tyson is in more danger in the fight than Jake Paul. Jake Paul is not a little guy. He's got power, and he's 30 years young. 30 years young, not a few years younger. I don't want to say old people can't do things. I played basketball last night. I still got it. I'm 42. Mike Tyson is 15 years older than me. 15 years older than me. It's kind of sad in a way where boxing has gotten to. I remember going to fights with Max Kellerman in Vegas back when I was producing for his show. And what was the fight we saw that was controversial? It was the Floyd Mayweather. Who did Floyd Mayweather fight where he sucker punched him? Ortiz? Yeah. And I remember the commentary after that fight was crazy. But I just don't think Mike Tyson at his age should be getting in the ring with anybody. And Jake Paul has been good at selectively picking his opponents. So he picks his opponent, and it's Iron Mike freaking Tyson, and people are going to be like, oh, wow, Jake Paul's going down. And then when it goes the other way, they're going to go, the fight is fixed. How, that's the way it's been working. It's worked with Jake Paul's fights. And I'm just surprised how many members of the media and others feel like Mike Tyson's just going to destroy Jake Paul, as if Mike Tyson didn't lose to Kevin McBride and Danny Williams 20 years ago. That's what it is. Kevin Zwicker, I have zero interest in this fight. I'm 28, so I'm too young to grow up on Prime Mike. I'm too old to be into the Paul brothers. Well, aren't you the same age as Jake Paul? I'd say you're essentially the same age as Jake Paul. I think he's 27. Logan Paul is, in WWE now. Did you see Mick Foley's reaction to Logan Paul getting the Prime match or the Prime sponsorship? See if I can find that, because they're going to put the Prime logo apparently on the center of the ring in WWE. It's only going to help Logan Paul as a heel, and that's really been a sacred place. Before, Vince didn't let people do the sponsorships in the middle of the ring. That was taboo in his day. But you see it here. Here was Mick Foley's reaction. That's like a match made in heaven for my son. He loves Prime, and he loves WWE. Now he doesn't love Logan Paul, but he does love those two things for sure. Berkey 711. Hey Robin, I'm looking forward to this because I like them both. It should be fun entertainment. I don't think it will be a competition though. I mean, look, I'm gonna watch it. I won't lie. So when you're commenting later, or the people that see the video later and decide they're gonna check it out and listen to it or watch it, that is, and give their comments later. The banner, it says "Stop the fight," whatever, or what's the title? I think it says Mike Tyson should not fight Jake Paul. I don't really care that much, but I don't think it's a good idea. I don't. And I'm not going to lie and say I do think it's a good idea. Make sure you do like and subscribe to the channel. Of course, comment, share with your friends. Comment later if you're checking it out later. Another thing I considered leading with today was a slow news day, to be real with you. Not that much going on in the sports world, in the world in general. Let me actually, before I get to the next topic, real quick, just before I forget, because I did address Aaron Rodgers yesterday on this show. I did address his whole thing about Sandy Hook, and he put out a statement today. So it's only fair to also share his statement. Here's what he said. As I'm on record saying in the past, what happened in Sandy Hook was an absolute tragedy. I am not and have never been of the opinion that the events did not take place. Again, I hope that we learn from this and other tragedies to identify. You get the point. Look, I'm glad he said it, even if it, didn't pass an AI fact check. And even if he did say the original comments, like I said yesterday, that's a non-starter. It's not an acceptable point of view that Sandy Hook didn't happen. It's the most devastating thing I can possibly imagine. But I don't think it helps anybody for us to sit here and continue to rah about it and crush Aaron Rodgers on this report from whatever he might have said 10 years ago. Because really all that does is bring the Sandy Hook tragedy back up when it doesn't need to be, and breathe life into conspiracy theory bullshit like that, which is what it is, bullshit. Have there been conspiracy theories that have been correct in the past? Sure. It's not, but this cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, gross stuff at the expense of people who experience real tragedy. I don't want to give it life. I don't want to breathe oxygen into it. Now, I will breathe oxygen into a sports take. And that was from Christopher Mad Dog Russo today, where I'm on Mad Dog's channel quite a bit on Mad Dog Sports Radio. You can check that out. But he apparently on First Take, actually, let me play you the First Take to appropriately set the context for this topic we're talking about right now. Here was Christopher Mad Dog Russo from earlier today.
I understand why they made the Celtics the favorite, but if it's Christopher Russo's money, and I had to make a play right now for a team to win it, I'm taking Denver. I love you can tell they have risen to the occasion in big spots. They've beaten the Celtics twice. They beat the Lakers in LA when LeBron had the 40,000-point game. I saw him play the Warriors about 2 Saturdays ago in Golden State. They did a tremendous job in the fourth quarter. They beat Miami last night in Miami, matchup, of course, last year in the NBA. I love this team. Now, they're not a great historical team. They got 2 great players. Murray's great. How he hasn't made an all-star team is ridiculous. And we know Jokic might be, at the end of the day, the greatest center in the history of the NBA. And that's saying a lot. He might be at the end of his career. He's that good. He's better than Shaq. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay,
he's better than Shaq.
He's better than Shaq. It's weird, because isn't Mad Dog the same guy who's always saying Bob Cousy is the best? And stuff like that. He's usually in love with the older generation, the really old school. So a little strange to see that take about Jokic. But here's the thing. Shaq was so absurdly dominant in his time. It's hard to say anybody was better than Shaq. But I don't know if that's wrong. I don't know if it's a wrong opinion. I mean, Jokic is so skilled. The way I put it is that Jokic is a combination of Bird, Magic, and Shaq because he's got size. You know, he might not be quite as physically dominant as Shaq, but he's huge. And you can't really move him. So Jokic gets to his spots, and he's so patient. So patient once he gets to his spots. And then he's got his vision like Magic. And then he's got the touch like Bird. And the instincts for the ball like Bird. That, you know, when I go back and watch old tapes, one of the things about Bird that stands out to me is his nose for the ball, if you will. You know, the ability to get in the right place. He was also an excellent passer, but a really good rebounder. And Jokic has the best touch for a big man I've ever seen. He's the best passing big man I've ever seen. He's now a shooter. I mean, he shoots from three, and he's physically dominant to the point where nobody can take him out of his game. I never see him get taken out of his game. I never see him rushed. I never see him make stupid mistakes out on the court or anything like that. You know, so those are the things that that I believe really elevate him. And in combination with Jamal Murray, I mean, that's almost an unstoppable pair because Murray can do it off the dribble and get into those spaces and make something out of nothing. And you partner those two together, that two-man game is unstoppable. So if you go look at Jokic's, you know, accolades, he is getting there. I mean, he's already a two-time MVP. He's already a six-time All-Star. He very well could be the MVP again this year. He very well could repeat as champion again this year. He's going to be in those conversations. You know, when you go back and the big men are tough because we always kind of put them in a separate category because you go back and you got Russell and all the rings that Russell won that people like to forget in the GOAT debate. They don't really give him his credit in the GOAT debate, even though he's got 11 in a row Bill Russell rings, as Hope said. Then you got Wilt and just the statistical anomaly that was Wilt Chamberlain and what he was able to do on a statistical level that, you know, mind-boggling stuff. Average 50 points a game for a season. Score 100 points in a game. All these other things. Then you got Kareem, who I think people sleep on Kareem's resume over time. That's why I bring up Kareem when I talk about LeBron breaking his record and getting all those point totals, because people forget that Kareem was also a six-time champ and a six-time MVP. You know? And he still was always introduced as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. That's why I think for LeBron, passing Kareem meant more than a ring, because Kareem's introduced that way. Now he can't be introduced that way, even though he's got as many championships as Jordan and one more MVP than Jordan. Think about, like, you know, put that in perspective for a second, in your head for a second, bounce that around. As many titles as Jordan, one more MVP, but not mentioned as the greatest of all time, or not introduced in that way, introduced as the NBA's all-time leading scorer. So that's why I think that mattered so much. And then you've got the likes of Tim Duncan, who people like to call a power forward, to put him in like a separate little box. And you've got the likes of Akeem Olajuwon, who gave Shaq and David Robinson the business. And then you got Shaq, who's physically dominant. And now you got Jokic. But can I tell you that any of those players checked as many boxes as Jokic? You know, playing in the era that Jokic plays in now. No. Nikola Jokic, I'll say this, is the most complete big man of all time. As a passer, his touch, his size, his shooting, his versatility, his ability to initiate offense. The most complete big man of all time. Where that makes him rank when it's all said and done, I think accolades matter there. I do. You know, Shaq did win, 4 titles? 3 with Kobe, 1 with the Heat. Duncan won 5 titles. All these, even Akeem got 2. So I think he has a little ways to go to build up the accolades. But if he gets another ring or 2, 2 or 3 rings, and hell, another MVP, he's at worst in the conversation. And is he better than? Has he accomplished more than Shaq? Is he more dominant? I mean, we always use the word dominant with Shaq. Is he better than Shaq? Probably. Probably. He probably is better than Shaq. Then I used to quasi-hate on Shaq when I was a kid for not having the refined game and only using his size and strength. As I've gotten older, I've realized that can be just as effective. But yeah, I don't think that's a wild take from Mad Dog. He certainly had wilder ones. Rihala 88. Wait till Jokic and Luka team up. It's game over for the league when that happens. I think Murray and Jokic is just as unstoppable, to be honest with you. It pairs perfectly. Luka needs the ball all the time. Yeah, he's awesome, but he has the ball all the time. Murray is a perfect complement to Jokic. It's exactly the counterpart to Jokic, like ideal kind of player. And so is Aaron Gordon, by the way. As, cutting baseline dunker spot, Jokic dumps it off or throws it up, and here comes Aaron Gordon. Those two guys fit like a glove as well. So I don't think you can ignore how good that fit is in Denver and how much sense those guys make together. How much sense those guys make together. By the way, Mr. Tyson take, you think he has no... Look, I'll never say he has no chance, but there's a reason the phrase puncher's chance exists. I think I'm a little concerned for his safety, as I said. And I think Jake Paul should be the favorite, a significant favorite in the fight, yes. Mike Tyson's 57 years old. He lost to Danny Williams and Kevin McBride 20 years ago by knockout. So I think nostalgia is a hell of a drug. I do think that. Joker is great, but Shaq would straight up bully dudes on the court, and he's won more than Joker so far, so it's early for me to say he's better than Shaq to me. Again, that's part of what makes it harder, like I said, because you need the accomplishments to come into play, versus a snapshot of a moment in time. You need the accomplishments to come into play. But, is he a better all-around basketball player? Probably. Speaking of basketball, I see a terrible story right now, but I do want to address it really quickly before I forget, or I won't forget. I'll see it tomorrow, and I never forget stories like this because it's just impossible to ignore trauma and negative stories like this. And when I say negative, I don't even want to say tragic is a better word. RJ Barrett lost his little brother. It was just confirmed. Nathan's former youth basketball coach, Nathan, I believe, I'm guessing his last name was Barrett, has died. I don't know the details around this. I sure as hell won't speculate what the details are. This is the TMZ sports story. I'll just say, damn, my heart goes out to RJ Barrett, right? And his entire family. I really do, man. I really do tear up, like, genuinely when I see stuff like this. I did it yesterday talking about Sandy Hook because that shit's not supposed to happen, man. He's not supposed to lose his brother like that. a young man is not supposed to be gone like that. And I don't even know what to say. I mean, there's nothing that can be said. There's nothing that will make something like this okay. There is nothing that will make something like this palatable. There's nothing that can be even expressed, that encompasses a tragedy of this magnitude. I just feel for him. I feel for him and his entire family, and I'm sorry. I don't know RJ Barrett. Never met RJ Barrett. He seems like a good dude from his interviews, but it's just it's unimaginable. It's unimaginable to lose somebody like that. Your younger bro. Just a kid. His whole life ahead of him, I don't know what happened. Like I said, I won't speculate what happened. It could be anything. We've seen some of these hard issues with basketball players. Who knows? All I know is that it shouldn't happen. And my heart genuinely goes out to RJ Barrett and his family. I got nothing else to add on it. I'm sorry. Truly. All right. Let me see if I can transition back into some of what I was going to talk about on the show today. How about this one? Mercedes Mone. We did I did the AEW WWE show last night, and I really appreciate one of the comments I got on the show last night. I want to read it because I was like kind of poking fun at the tribalism of those the fans. And somebody made a comment, and the real Yanks Up wrote, "You got to wait a few months before you can call out fans for tribalism after some of your shorts / content played into benefiting off that. LOL. Glad you've ditched that kind of vibe lately, though. I love your WWE content and would love to hear you talk more about AEW and historic wrestling too, like in this video." And I thought that was a very fair critique. I mentioned it on the show yesterday. I did that, I did some of that stuff because I thought it was funny. I did some of it because I saw that when you did AEW, WWE comparisons, it did really well. I did some of it because the AEW fan base is easy to needle. They're so, I mean this respectfully now, almost cultish. And I do prefer WWE, but I've tried to knock it off and focus, like if there's something that I want to critique, I'm going to critique it. And if there's something I want to make a joke about, I'm going to make a joke about it. Don't get it twisted, but I'm not going to do it in a cheap fashion. And I think the some of the stuff that AEW has done recently has been good. I mean, I think the signings that they made have made sense for them. I think Mercedes made more sense for them than WWE, because in WWE, the women's division is so stacked. You've got Rhea Ripley, you've got Bianca Belair, you've got Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair will come back, you got Io Sky, you got Bayley, you got Jade Cargill on her way up, you got Tiffany Stratton on her way up. Stacked. In AEW, she's not just the biggest star in the women's division, she is the biggest star maybe in the company. In fact, I would argue that the three big signings that AEW just made are the biggest stars that they have right now. When you look at Okada and Ospreay and, of course, Mercedes. And I liked her presentation last night. They made it feel like she was a star. I liked her, what's the music, the CEO bit. I liked that too. I dug that. The CEO thing I liked. I liked it. I did not like her promo very much. It was kind of blah to me. But overall, I'm a fan of what they've been doing. It's introduced me more into AEW, or got me more into AEW. With that said, the ratings, the numbers came out, and they weren't great. They weren't great. Here's a little bit of a breakdown on WrestleNomics has quarter-hour numbers from last night's AEW Dynamite. This is from Diraj Giri. Here are some observations I had. The opening Mercedes quarter had 1 million viewers. The fifth time this year, this quarter had greater than 1 million viewers. It was the fifth biggest first quarter for the show so far this year. So a good number for them, but not a game-changing sort of number for them. Okada's first Dynamite match since signing with AEW started in quarter 3 and finished in quarter 4, which dropped 10% and was the third lowest quarter on the show. The main event only averaged 627,000 viewers. I mean, it looks like AEW on that show is floating around 800,000 viewers consistently now. Now, again, TV ratings are also an outdated way to measure these things and to get into these things, because you also have to look at digital numbers and the like. WWE was just touting 100 million YouTube subscribers, and we've seen them tout The Rock's numbers when he came back, and CM Punk's numbers when he came back digitally. And I'm sure I had an argument with my co-hosts, my boys, Gene Cherry and Dave Sepperson, about who's the biggest women's star in the world. And they were telling me that Mercedes was bigger than Rhea Ripley. I bet you the digital numbers from Rhea Ripley are through the roof, especially when you see photos like this one that just came across my timeline. I mean, to me, Mommy is the biggest star on the women's side in pro wrestling right now. But Mercedes ain't that far off. And I'm not going to hate. I like the move for AEW. But here's the thing. I also saw, what did Meltzer write about Will Ospreay? This was like almost a nonsensical take or report from him about Will Ospreay. He wrote that like Triple H maybe didn't know what they had in Will Ospreay, or what Will Ospreay was. Here it is. This made no sense to me, to be honest with you. I know people in WWE, when this was going down, it was becoming very clear it was going to AEW, not WWE, and they offered a lot less money. Look, I like the Ospreay's promo, but I think it just simply comes down to this. WWE didn't feel like they needed him as much as AEW did. And hence AEW offered more money. It ain't that complicated. It ain't that deep. If WWE thought they needed him, they would have offered the money. And they didn't. It is what it is. So it remains to be seen. And it's going to come down to what they do with Mercedes going forward. But overall, I like the debut. Kevin Zwicker, Mercedes came off as a star, and her segment did 1 billion views last night. One of her tenure was a big success. Kudos to Tony. I mean, all Tony did was cut the check, but yeah. I like it. Got them attention. We'll see how we'll see what happens in 2 or 3 weeks. But overall, I think AW is in a rough spot. They were in a rough spot, and now they're bouncing back. By the way, as we speak, I think they just showed Mercedes at the Celtics game in Boston. Here you go. In real time. Let's see what the...
Mercedes Mone is now all elite, and she's ready to rewrite wrestling history. Don't miss All Elite Wrestling Dynamite Live.
Okay, so it wasn't like it wasn't a random showing. It was a paid promotion for All Elite. Obviously the cross promotion there with TNT and TBS. So that's what that was. But nevertheless, good for her. Good for them. And you are right, Kevin. Cutting the check is the most important part. I'm not going to argue with that point of things. I'm not going to argue with that perspective. All right, last thing I did have on the rundown. So if you have any other questions, get them in. It's the last show of the week. I'll be back on Monday. You know what? I will never rule out now that I can do this, just doing a live stream, or soon eventually I'm going to start posting videos to the channel. I'm sure I'll cut some shorts tomorrow. I was caught up today, but I can't say I won't ever go live to react to something. I'm not going to say that, but this show is Monday through Thursday. That's the regular cadence of this show. And this is the last show of the week. So if you have anything you want to get in, now is the time to get it in. Like and subscribe to the channel as well. Make sure you comment. Make sure, you do all that sort of stuff to, support and do everything. As I see this comment, how you look, I love the outlet, for sure. I love the outlet. I love the community. I love the fact that, you guys are in here, and so many of the different comments that I'm getting, from people who are watching later. I had several of the biggest shows that I've done last week. Maybe even the top two of the top three of the top four last week. So that was good. We'll see how some of these, they sort of garner views as they pick them up over time a little bit. But the LeBron Jordan one and the Caitlin Clark one shows her power. The Caitlin Clark one really did well last week. So yeah, that's really cool. And as I said, the silver lining that I've learned from this whole Sports Illustrated situation, if you could read some news about SI out there right now, the silver lining that I've learned and taken from this is I'm always going to do something like this and keep it going. What this channel is, how it looks in the future, that remains to be seen. It will evolve. It will change. I can't promise you it'll be exactly the same, but I did so many things for them that didn't benefit me. So many big videos, so many big pieces that benefited SI and didn't benefit me. And I probably should have been doing something like this to connect with fans every day or frequently and build my own brand in the meantime, which I didn't, but too late now. I am doing it now, and I tried to use the SI situation, one as like a jumping off point to say, look, I'm not taking this shit on the chin. Here I am. Also, for that momentum that came from it. And it's, in a sense, a bit of therapy, right? Talking to you guys, being into, I don't hold anything back. I think you guys have seen that. I don't hold anything back on this show. I try to be honest and authentic. I do think that resonates when you're honest and authentic with people. I think that matters. I think that connects to people. So that's what I'm trying to do. So yeah, am I liking it? Yes, for sure. I'm liking it. It's hard to know what it'll look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But when I know, it's time to go live, I know you guys are going to be here. And I know I'm going to do what I've done. I've always done what I am best at, I think, and genuinely good at, and objectively have produced results doing at every stop I've been at. Anybody can say whatever they want. They can never say that I didn't produce at the jobs that I've done. Doug Developer, Robert, I'm curious, when you graduated from Maryland and applied for sports radio jobs, what other cities did you apply to, or just New York? I didn't apply to New York at all. I didn't apply to it. I've never gotten a job through a job application. Never. Other than maybe the Around the Horn job when I was in college. So long story short, since you're asking, and before I get to the final topic of the show, I went to school, University of Maryland. And while there, I worked at the student radio station, WMUC is a student radio station at University of Maryland. Peter Rosenberg was on this show. He used to still do his Dusk Till Dawn show there. I would come back from sports broadcasts and hang out and talk hip hop over there. But more or less, I worked my way up the ladder there, where I started doing like field hockey and lacrosse and soccer. I eventually got to doing basketball and football. I co-ran the station with a woman now, named Heather Schwartz. I think her last name is McDonough now. We co-ran the station together. I applied for a job at Around the Horn. And I guess because I went to University of Maryland, which is nearby, and what I had done, I applied for an internship, that the school had sent out. I went in for a job interview there, or an internship interview. It was hot as hell, and I was wearing a suit. And it was Bill Wolf and Brad Como. Brad Como's over at SNY. I'm not sure what Bill's doing now, but he was a TV executive for a long time. And they made fun of me for the way I dressed, but they hired me. They gave me the job. And I remember a few things about Around the Horn, but it taught me how to think like a producer. It taught me how to think like a producer and put a rundown together every day and stuff like that. And I remember seeing this other kid there, and I hope he's doing well. He was affectionately called Champ because he wore a Champ Bailey jersey like every day. I think he was a waiter at Applebee's or something and asked for the job, and they gave him the job. But at the time, I'm thinking of him as my competition. And I realized, let me put it this way, I was better suited for that line of work than he was. But nice guy. But I remember one time he went and, PTI and Around the Horn are adjoining rooms. And I remember one time he went into the PTI room to ask how to use the copy machine. And he asked Tony Kornheiser how to use the copy machine in the middle of the thing, in the middle of their production meeting. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not so much competition for me. And really, what, I know it's like above interns nowadays, but what ingratiated me to the crew there was I got the food orders right. And this is when Chipotle was a new thing. And I would just get their food orders and I'd memorize them and it'd be ready. So by the time Max Kellerman, who was the host of the show at the time, would show up, food orders were there, what have you. So I've told this story. I got Tony Reali's suit the first day he was on Around the Horn because Max had a dental emergency and they're like, who's on camera? Tony's on camera. Let's throw him on. Because he was actually the statistician on PTI. And they just made that an on-air role. Like it wasn't supposed to be an on-air role. And good for him. He took that opportunity and ran with it. But Max and crew, that whole crew left for New York to do a show called IMAX. And that's what I was hired to do out of school. So I left, I skipped my last few weeks of school and went up to New York. I lived with one of Max's friends' apartments for a while. I lived with Max's parents for a while. I lived with Max in his spot for a while. And then I lived on 109th in Amsterdam with a mime. And then I lived on 95th in Columbus for 8 years with a crew there. Shouts to those guys. Justice, Ish, Power, Sean, who's been in this chat a lot. Boo, R.I.P. Boo. I lived there for 8 years, but regardless, I was at IMAX, and that show lasted, I want to say, 9 months, 10 months. It wasn't long. Variety of reasons it didn't last. One of them was Max. Speaking of R.J. Barrett and what happened, Max's brother was tragically murdered during that time frame. I still feel for him to this day for that. It was just a devastating thing to see somebody go through. And the show ended, and naively, I thought at the time I would just get another job. And some of those guys did. They all went and did Tucker Carlson's show for a while. You remember Max was on Tucker Carlson's show going against Rachel Maddow, and Tucker was there. And I thought I was going to get hired. I was the only one who didn't get hired. And at that time, Around the Horn, actually offered me a job, but it was through it. It was never directly to me. It was through a go-between, and I wasn't sure the parameters of it. And I just moved to New York. Look, maybe my career would be different if I had accepted that job and gone back to DC at the time. Actually, in fact, I emailed, I think Aaron Solomon's still over there. And he seemed pissed at me later when I was reaching out to people when I was in a situation where I needed some help and was looking for contacts. And I guess he thought I dissed them. I didn't mean to. I was a kid. But that can be the biz sometimes. I apologized, but I basically said I just moved to New York. I thought I was going to get another job here. I didn't realize, So I spent a period of time at that time on unemployment. I was on unemployment until it ran out. The only time in my life I've been on unemployment. And then I was waiting tables and bartending and doing an open mic on Bleecker Street, and went to a bunch of stand-up comedy clubs and the like, until Max got over at 1050 ESPN Radio, and he got my foot in the door there. And I worked as an intern there. I think I worked for free, to be honest with you, until I could finally get on payroll for $14 an hour. $14 an hour is what I was paid. And I worked on Stephen A. Smith's show and Max's show. In fact, I think the first day I ever met Stephen A., he asked me to go get him food. And it was a hot dog with sauerkraut, no ketchup and mustard. And I worked there. And then I eventually became a part of Max's show. And I was the sidekick and sort of comedian on that show. And I think we were ahead of our time. I really do think we were ahead of our time. And it's a shame that things went the way they did. I mean, I think he'd be okay with me sharing this. He did mention Max. I sent him the Killer Animal tournament that somebody sent us the other day in this chat. I texted it to him, just letting him know that people still remembered that show. And he mentioned that he was a maniac back in those days. And I would always get called into the principal's office as a result of something he said or did, which I guess painted me in a negative light with the GM at the time. That GM leaves, new GM comes in, because there was a period of time I didn't know what I was doing there. I launched a website back then called Lundberg.me. Sort of parallels to this point in my career. I launched it, that was the young me versus the older veteran me doing it this way. But I launched a site there that I would do on the side, Lundberg.me. And I was assigned to be basically Warner Wolf's intern, more or less. Warner Wolf's right-hand man. And then Warner Wolf got fired because of something that happened on the Imus show. And by the way, Warner's a super nice guy. I didn't know what I was going to do again until they put me on as the producer on Ryan Rucco's show. And I created a mechanism to get myself on air on that show. And the new GM liked what he heard and eventually partnered us up. And Rucco and myself, that show went, and we were doing the early mornings, and then we were doing 10 to 11 on top of 5 to 6 in the morning. And then we got the noon to 2, noon to 3. I forget the exact time slot. But that's when I thought I had just made it, because I remember seeing my face on a billboard. And I was like, oh, I did it, But lo and behold, that show didn't last that long either, through no fault of our own. I was texting with Ryan about this the other day too, because he and I are still in contact, because it is frustrating for me, because I've had success, as I said before, everywhere I've been, objective success. The ratings were good for the show. The podcast downloads I did on my own show were great. The numbers I've done at SI, no one's put more video views on the board than me in the history of that company. That's just is what it is. I did an article on Shakira and J-Lo for the halftime show, 2 million page views or whatever. The video I did on LeBron, 10 million Facebook views. I've had millions of views within the calendar year on videos there. So it's frustrating for me sometimes, if I'm being real about it, to continue to prove myself over and over again and not always get dealt the best hand. But what do? Pick yourself back up. You keep going. Like Jay-Z said, you keep showing up. So I did text with Ryan about that. But, Ryan, that show ended because Stephen A. Smith came back. And when Stephen A. Smith came back, we were in the midst of our second drive to the Super Bowl. We did a drive to Dallas bit, if some of you remember, where we drove to Dallas in a Hummer. And we stopped in various spots. I think DC, Pittsburgh, I want to say Little Rock, Arkansas, and then Dallas. And then the next year we did the same thing to Indianapolis. And when we were in Indianapolis, Nashville was one of the places we stopped to. When we were in Indianapolis, I remember finding out about the end of the Rucco and Lundberg show. You're damn skippy it is. But I remember finding out about that because Stephen A. had come back and they had Stephen A. on at 9. And or at night, at night. And they needed somewhere to put him. And we had the weakest deal, right? And then at that point in time, I was actually going off to get married when they put Ryan off with Stephen A. And I had no idea what my role was going to be. It was I didn't know if I was going to have a job when I was getting married in Florida. And when I came back, I talked to the GM, who is still there now, and he's actually in a big position on the TV side. He was always my biggest supporter, except for twice. He just ridiculously flipped on me for no apparent. I mean, apparently it's a pattern. It's happened to other people. That was like strange. And he offered me the producer role on the Michael Kay show. And I said, no, I wouldn't take a role if it wasn't on air. Which led to the early morning slot. It started at 3 a.m., I believe was the first slot. And I did 3 to 5, I want to say, or 3 to 4 at first. And then I wound up paired up with Jared Max in the very early mornings. And then I got my own show. And I remember thinking at that time, I'm going to capitalize on the podcast. And shout out to RJ, who was the producer. We got that out fast. That podcast was out at 7 o'clock in the morning. And, that was really, really good. Now you're saying I should have taken that job. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Regardless, my podcast downloads were as good as anybody but Kay's in the afternoon, but the afternoon show. And then the old GM came back, and I've told this before, but I touted my podcast downloads, and he said, we got to get the pizza right before we sell the cannolis or some shit like that. And eventually they then partnered me up with Mike Golick Jr. in the early mornings, and that show went national. And I was thinking about moving to Bristol at that point. That's what I thought was going to happen. Perhaps. I did Mike and Mike. And then the layoffs there happened, which led to the job at SI, which I almost got, in retrospect, too quickly. Because, again, I didn't build my own brand enough maybe in the meantime. But that's kind of the story of my career, more or less. Were you adamant to do radio in New York City? Would you have moved to LA, Chicago, Houston? Dude, I'd go anywhere for the right opportunity. I've chatted with somebody in Philadelphia. In LA, I did a test show with Marcellus Wiley after Max left that show that I thought I might get that job. So, that's the long and short of it. But, Peter and I did some test shows together at 1050 or 98.7 also. So that's, you just asked me if I applied for a job. I thought, they told me at the time that, what did they tell me? you had to go to a smaller market in order to then get to the bigger markets. And I always thought I'd blaze my own trail. And I have. That's the other thing. As frustrating as things can be, as frustrating as this current situation can be, regardless of what happens from here on out, I now have this. Meaning when I say this, my connection with you guys, but also the ability to put out my own content, no matter what else I'm doing, which didn't exist in the past. The media business is crumbling. It's crumbling. But I know I'm good at this, so I have this outlet regardless of what else happens, and I also did it. I had no advantages. I was a kid from Lusby, Maryland. No connection in the business. No dad to get me kickstarted. No nothing. I did it. So there's that part of it that I want to take a little pride in too. You think a show with, I mean, yes and no. I think we have some similarities, but I also think we're both really good at this sort of thing. I thought the first show we did together was really good. 2 Bergs, 1 show. But I could see why they might have thought that at the time. You said, well, I appreciate you listening at 4 a.m. How were you up at 4 a.m.? Did you listen to the podcast? Or did you get up were you that dedicated? I saw some way. No, I haven't addressed this. SI is not being sold. SI is owned by a company called Authentic Brands Group. SI is owned by a company called Authentic Brands Group. It's already been sold. It was bought and sold a few times while I've been there. And what happened in this current situation is SI is licensed out. The operation of the media business is licensed out to a company called Arena Group, formerly called Maven. And they pay a licensing fee yearly. And when the new owner of that company, the 5 Hour Energy guy, took over, he just didn't pay the licensing fee. I think he thought it would lead to them renegotiating. They pulled the license. When they pulled the license, that's when they sent a note to all of us saying, you're all gone. Currently, the license is still up in the air. Your guess is, your guess is not as good as mine. I think you can go read the reports on how that might shake out. Let's just say I'm not counting on anything there. If it winds up in the hands of a different company, we'll see what that means for the staff. But it's just not a good situation. It was never a good situation. And it's, a very unique situation in a sense. I mean, it's not like, anybody was earmarked or they said, Robin, you're not doing this, or this person's not doing this. It was like, this happened one day. And all over what really amounts to a pissing contest. So if you have any more questions on the career, I can share them. Like I said, I'm going to be authentic here. I think that connects with people. I think that resonates with people. I think people appreciate it. And that's what this channel is going to be about. The last thing I did have on the rundown, here's a quick pivot, is Marvel focusing big. That was the report from earlier today that Marvel would be focusing on their bigger properties. And in a sense, I think Guardians of the Galaxy was both the best and worst thing that happened to Marvel. It was the best thing because it showed that they could do almost anything and it wouldn't fail. Because I was a big comic book head when I was growing up. I didn't know who the Guardians of the Galaxy were, or barely, right? And, it made them great characters. It made them characters that, it was a lightning in a bottle because kids associated with Rocket and Groot, and now that's a big property for them. But it probably also made them think they could just do anything. And some of the characters and shows that they've tried to launch are not characters and shows that should be headliners. So I do agree with this strategy. Eternals should have never been a movie, if we're being real. No offense to the late, great Jack Kirby. Should have never been a movie. Doug Developer, what time did you go to bed when you did the 4 a.m. show? I rode a bike into the studio. I think city bikes were there. I rode a bike to and from. My craziest schedule, by the way, was when I was doing 4 to 6 Monday through Friday, SNY Friday night, late night, local New York radio again Saturday morning, and then national ESPN radio Saturday late night with Reese Waters. I split shift my sleep. I would sleep from like, let's say 10 or 11 at night to like 2:33 in the morning. Then I would go do the show, record my updates, leave at like 7 in the morning, go back, take Raj, my youngest son, to the park to get breakfast, and then Gymboree. Then I go back to sleep around 10 a.m. and sleep till like 1 p.m. That was my sleep schedule. Definitely feels like MCU got overconfident for sure, probably. Marvel is cooked. Marvel ended on Endgame. I think, I did an episode, though, of this show where Deadpool and Wolverine could, as Will Ospreay said last night, restore the feeling, right? Restore the feeling. So we'll see. That's a big, big movie for them because they are getting the X-Men back. You have to remember they're getting the X-Men back, which is huge. They're getting Fantastic Four, which is also big, not to the same extent as X-Men, but that's a big deal to get those properties back. It is. But, get anything else in the chat. That's going to do it for me otherwise here tonight. I hope you guys, enjoyed the career history there. I did not expect to go off on that, but I do think I do think people like stuff like that. And I promise I will be honest and authentic with you here. So please also do me that favor. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Comment later if you're watching later. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think I can do to get better at this. What you think that I can do to improve the show. All that sort of stuff. But I do appreciate you guys being in here and caring. And yeah, I think the behind the scenes stuff resonates. When I do have the interviews on here, I'll get into that sort of thing. Doug Developer, Thanos was the final boss of an amazing video game, and the game is over. All you can do is play the side missions that don't amount to anything. That's MCU right now. It's pretty good. Maybe that's why you're a developer, Doug. Right? That's probably why you got that name. All right. Appreciate you guys. I'll be back on Monday. Same Robin channel. Have a good weekend. Peace out.